All right, let's get started. It's 3:31, so let's get started. Hayden, if there's still people, just leave the door open. Perhaps we just close it in a bit. Thanks. All right, my name's Martin. I'm going to be talking today about Apex 18.1 new APIs. Now, part of that is a bit of a lie because I'm going to show you there's some 5.1 APIs I think that are really critical to know, so I'm going to show you both at the same time. Now, before we begin, I'd like to start with this question. Who here can tell me what the quickest way to do something is? There we go. You get a t-shirt for that answer, right? So everyone laughs about it, but it is true. The quickest way to do something is to not do it at all. And as developers, our first natural instinct that we've been trained and bred to do is when you hear a problem, you go and you build it. And the funny thing is, most of the time, someone's already probably at least built part of it for you, right? We're more integrators today than actually net new developers. And that's the nice thing with the Apex APIs is they've already built a lot of great features, not just for Apex, but also through your PL SQL development. There's a lot of how many people here use Apex APIs just in general in their PL SQL code? But how many use it for like non-Apex-ish things? Okay, good. Some of you, good. Most of you hopefully will go back and learn more about that. And which goes to the goal of this presentation is if you're not already using the APIs for your standard PL SQL development or you're not aware of it, I'd like you to just spark some interest in it. What this will not cover is I'm not going to make you an API expert in 1 hour. That's impossible. And some of the things I'm going to go through quickly, or you might not understand it all right away. But everything's documented and available online. So just remember, everything you see here it's more of I didn't know that was possible. Let me go read, practice, and learn about it. And hopefully you get hooked. Now, I'm not saying do that tonight. I don't expect anyone to, while their party's going on, to be sitting at home reading or sitting in the hotel reading the API documents, but maybe next week sometime, that'd be great. That would be really good and beneficial for yourselves. So how today's going to work is I'll do a really quick introduction. Then there's two main sections we'll go through. We'll do PL SQL APIs as well as JavaScript APIs. They're kind of broken up into two. I hope we can get it all done. I'm not sure how the timing's going to work out. And if we don't get everything done, again, the slides are all online right now, and the demos will be online, both the scripts I use and the applications. So questions, I gave a very similar talk last year on the 5.1 APIs, and we got a lot of great questions throughout the talk. So if you have a question, don't wait till the end, just put up your hand, because it usually sparks a good conversation. If it gets too complicated, I will defer it to later on at the end. And as I said, there's 3 t-shirts, one's already claimed. Next two people that ask a question, and it's got to be a relevant question, will get a t-shirt. So a bit about me. I'm an Oracle ACE director. I've been developing with PL SQL and Apex for close to 15 years now. For my job, I'm director of innovation at InSum Solutions. A little bit on open source. I just put this, we're not talking open source, but in case you're curious, I founded an organization called Aura Open Source. It's, as the name suggests, it's really focused on open source Oracle software. Who here hasn't heard of Aura Open Source? Okay, that's great. Has not. Great. How many people here using Logger or OS Utils? Okay. So if you're not using any of those and you don't know what they are, check them out. They're completely open source, MIT license. Highly recommend. Will make your life easier. That's the quick and dirty of it. InSum is the company I work for. Like I said, we're the largest Apex consulting firm in North America. If you have any questions or want more information about what we do or how we could help your organization, please see me at the end of this presentation, or anyone. Most of us are wearing the green hat. But worst case, you can go to our website, insum.ca, after. So the first thing is, where do we get the API docs? And the reason why I put this in here is some people don't even know about this. When I talk to them about it, I just say, oh, go read the documents, and they're not even aware of it. So I'm going to go to apex.oracle.com, and now this has changed. Back before it was you had to go on the download page. Now you just click Learn, Documentation, and you scroll down, and there's they actually broke it down 2 areas here. One is you have the API, and one is the JavaScript API. So that's the only real differences from 5.1 to 18.1. And then once you have them, I strongly suggest you pin them. I've got them both pinned on my Chrome tab, so they're quick and easy to use. All right, for the rest of the slides, it's all pretty much a little quick problem and solution, and then we go into demo. Now, what I did do is just to help you know what's in 5.1. So how many of you here are on 5.1 right now? Okay, so the majority. So 5.1 will show you things you can probably use today, and anything that's completely net new is tagged with 18.1. Is that clear for everyone? And I tried to, for anyone that's colorblind, because I realize I probably chose the two worst color for people that are colorblind, you'll notice that 5.1 is in italics. Are you colorblind? Okay, so 5.1 is in italics, and 18.1, aside from the numbers that are obviously, it's in bold, right? So I did try my best to compensate for that. The other thing too is you'll notice that everything here is, all the APIs are written in code text. What you don't see is if you go on the slides online, and I'll show the link at the end of the presentation, they're all hyperlinked right to the section in the documentation. So to make your life easier, when you're reading this through and you see something, and I'll just show you one example for this one, I can just click on it and it will bring me right to the 18.1 documents. So I'm trying to make your lives easier as you follow through. Any questions on that? Okay, no problem. You're welcome. I'm glad if you like it, I'll do it for next year as well. So the first thing is, how many people here get RESTful, deal with RESTful services and JSON data? Okay. The rest of you, this will change as time evolves. You're going to get more and more JSON data. And then it becomes, how do I query that JSON data? And the last thing you want to do is self-parse JSON data. And also, you usually, most of the time, you don't actually want to go row by row, right? You don't want to take it, put it through a parser, and then go row by row to find some information. In most cases, the ideal situation is to take JSON data, slam it into a query, and then join it with your normal table data. Because for us as Apex and PL SQL developers, SQL is the easiest and quickest thing to do. Now, there are some JSON, if you're on 12c, which hopefully most of you are, there are already native JSON data structures in there. But just in case you're not, Apex has this great thing called apexjson.toXML type. And it's available in 5.1. And what it will allow us to do is take JSON, scramble it up, and actually allow us to join it to other data. And so I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So the first thing, I'm just going to go in SQL CL because it's just easier this way. And how many people knew that you could actually do this in SQL CL? You can just type in set format JSON. And then when you write a query, it will actually output everything in JSON format. Do you guys know that? No one? Okay, well now you learn something extra for free. And I'm just going to copy and paste it and go back in. So this is what it will look like. And now just with a little bit of extra code, I can convert, you'll see there's Apex JSON to XML type. And again, don't write this all down. You're not going to get it in the time of this demo. This will all be available after. If I run this script and I paste it in with that exact JSON data structure, it's going to come out as a table. So this should be something you're all very familiar with now. Right? So it's employee and salary number. And you can do this with pretty much any JSON data structure. And you can query it and get in a table. And hopefully this is starting to get your creative juices going of saying, well, now I can take this and join it to my employees table and then do whatever else you need to do with it. Because it's in SQL, you're no longer dealing with JSON or XML. And I'm not anti-JSON. I love JSON. It's just when I'm in the Oracle database, it's a lot easier to play with SQL. So you're no longer doing row by row, you're doing set operations. Any questions on that? Yes? Is there a way to cache the JSON converting? Well, for large queries, what you could do is probably put it to the top and use a materialize hint. I'm not sure. I'd have to actually look, because I've only used this in a query, but I don't know if you can save this into a variable. But if you could, I think it's probably an XML type variable, and you could probably do that at the top if you needed to query it multiple times. If you were calling it in a PL SQL block. But if it's in an Apex report, for instance, you couldn't really do it. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, CSV data. How many people here get CSV data they got to parse? A lot. How fun is it? All right, if you're in JavaScript, this is one of these. It's problem solved. It's really easy. But unfortunately, in the database, it's not too easy. If you have access and really nice DBAs, they'll let you load external tables. But for the rest of us, no one trusts me, so I'm usually not allowed that access. And so there's got to be better ways to parse it. And thankfully, with a little bit of creativity, and that's why I put a little warning on there that some additional code is required, and I'll show you, you can actually split simple CSVs. Now, if you have more complicated ones, you'll have to think creatively of how you split it, and I'll show you why. But there's apex_string.split, and let's just scroll down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up first. So I'm going to use the list ag, and I'm going to generate a list of employee numbers. And this is really for our sample data set. So I'm just going to take this here just to show you where I got this number. And I colon delimited it rather than comma, simply because that's what we get through Apex when you have a multi-select list. By the way, this all builds on towards the CSV solution. You're probably saying, this doesn't look like my CSV data. Follow me through and this will make sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this colon delimited strings of numbers and I'm going to try and pivot it back into a table structure. Is everyone clear on that? Okay. So if I run this, I know how exciting this is. I now have employee numbers like this. Right? But you'll notice that what apex_string.split does, again, is it can take a row of data, and when you cast it as a table, it pivots it into column data. Any questions on this so far? No? Okay. Does anyone see the linking with CSV yet? A few people? Okay. So just to prove this out, I can now take this and then join it with a real table to find the full set of employees. And this is what I'm talking about, always doing set operations where I can now join it together and saying these are all the employees that was in that list. How many people knew you could do that with apex_string.split? 1, 2, okay. Good, that's a few of you. But here's the real case. This is our CSV, and you'll notice I just used commas as the delimiters. I did not quote them or do any fancy escapes. So I'm going to assume super simple CSV parsing. But hopefully some of you guys can get data like this. So this is a 3-column table, first name, last name, and department, and then I have three rows in there. So I'll just copy this all here. And now I'm going to take that exact same apex_string.split and run it. Same data set, or new data set. And so what I did is, what I did though for the splitting string is I took the end of line character and said that's what I want to be. So I want all the end of line characters to be on a new row. So what I've taken is this large clob essentially, though it really isn't that large, and broken it up into row by row. But that still doesn't solve our set. Now that we have everything on a new row, we need to go across and have it on as each individual columns. And this is where the creativity comes in. With a little bit of regular expressions, and you're going to have to trust me, this regular expression works. I'm going to run the exact same query, but notice how I have to run it three times, one for each column. I'm going to run the exact same query, and lo and behold, I now have my CSV in a query in a table, and I could do joins or whatever. This last thing here is really just it's because I had a line break here. And if you wanted to get rid of the headers, you could just say where row num is not equal to 0, or not equal to 1. Helpful for some people? Yeah, okay. And if you're not good with regular expressions, how many people here are really comfortable with regular expressions? Okay, don't hide away from them. They can be your best friends and they can be your worst enemies if you don't know about it. What I would recommend, I'm on a Mac, so for the rest of you on Windows, I don't know what tool you can use, but find a tool where you can write and get quick responses. I use a really old tool in Mac called Patterns where I can start writing them out and get quick responses right away. If you have a tool like that, it will make your life really easy. If you're developing regular expressions in Oracle, and it's not a knock on Oracle, it's just not quick enough, and you're not going to get results good enough, and you're going to get frustrated. I always struggled with regular expressions until I got this, and it's got a nice little help guide here. And it's just made my life easier. And so once you do a bunch of them, you'll actually just write them naturally. You won't have to look up help or anything. And so I don't know if anyone on Windows has any recommendations for tools or no? Okay. Regex plugin? Oh, Regex Buddy? Okay. So if you're on Windows, Regex Buddy, or I think there's one or two good websites that are out there. All right, execute code. So over the past week, we've heard all about the new integrated RESTful services within Apex. How many people here now are comfortable with this concept of a web source? A few? Okay. And by the way, the rest of the demos on 18.1, I'm not going to like condensify them. I'm actually going to build them all out so you get comfortable about seeing some of the new 18 features. So web source is you define a RESTful service and then you can actually query against it. It used to be called like RESTful services or modules before. It's called web source now. And what we want to do is I want to show you this entirely new package called Apex Exec. And what Apex Exec does is it allows you to parse both SQL and PL SQL against 3 different data sets, against local data, like your local SQL query, against a RESTful service, or against what Apex calls a predefined web source. And I'm going to show you first what a web source is so I don't lose people, and then show you how we can use Apex Exec. So I'm going to log into my Apex application, and if we go into shared components, let me just follow along here with my script. I'm going to need this. If you go, there's something new down here called, it used to be called, the old thing is Legacy RESTful Web Services. You shouldn't be using that. The new thing is Web Source Modules. I'm going to create name, we'll just call it users. Sure. No. And you'll notice that all I did was provide it with a URL, and it just produces me with this table. And this is just some sample data set I got online, but this is live against their service. So now I've got this web service out there, and on my page, if I go back and edit page 1, I can just create like an interactive report against it. So what page is this? Edit page 3. So here, I just did this as a placeholder, but local database, this is what you guys are most used to of writing queries. In 18.1 now, you can say the source is a web source, and here we choose users. If I click save now, I'm running it, and this is the JSON data that gets pulled in that we query against. Is that pretty cool so far? Okay, but that's not the APIs. That's not what you came here to see. So let me put the new question to you. So let's say this is your report, but now from the back-end processing point, you want to actually take this and you want to go and email each user. So you could, one way of doing it is going through and doing that XML or that JSON parsing that I showed you before, and you can create a query and loop row by row. That's one way of doing it. Another way is using the new supported Apex Exec API. So using that, let me open it in code first just to show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to define 2 columns that I'm interested in the JSON data structure, name and email, because I want to say hello Bob and really just email Bob, right, from that list. So everyone's clear with the problem? I want to take the entire JSON data structure from here that generated this and just email each user saying hello. And so what I do is I say I'm going to use the users. Remember that web source I just created, so I don't have to define everything. Everything's defined and the authentication's already happened in Apex. And I'm going to run it. And then here, these are the 2 positions for name and email. And then here I'm just going to go through a loop one by one and then get the varchar2 for each one of those name and emails. So think I'm converting the JSON to an array and I'm looping through it. Yes, Bill? You can add a where clause in there, so it's in the Apex Exec there's a way to add predicates, but the predicates have their own types. I decided to take it away because it's actually a lot of code just to write one predicate in there. Not impossible, I'm not discouraging from you, but read the documentation. It's not as simple as writing where one is equal to, or like employee name is, or department is equal to sales or something. You have to define a type, append it to the type, and then append the type to it's essentially you append it to this. So you group together your filters and your order bys, and you append it to this, and it actually executes the web source. So it's a simple API. It takes a while to get used to. It was new to me as well. I haven't actually used any of this in production because I'm still just have locally 18.1. But all I'm going to do is put out the name and email, and we're just going to pretend that's simulating an email. So let's go. I'm just going to set server output on. And now I'm just going to run that code. OK, I'm going to... okay, so it must be invoked from an Apex session. I got my ordering wrong. I'm going to come back. Someone remind me, I'm going to come back to this demo because I don't want to ruin the next big surprise. So just for now, pretend that this actually worked and I looped through the user thing. So what this says is it has to know my Apex session, and it's specific. It has to know the Apex session because if we go here, this user's web source module has to really be registered against an Apex application. And note to self, don't move your slides around an hour before. That's not a good idea. So someone remind me, Bill, I'm going to put you in charge to come back just to show you that this works. But there's a reason why I didn't fix it. OK, how many people here have multi-tenant applications? A few? OK, so those that don't have them or don't know what multi-tenant applications, what they are essentially multiple clients, not users, but really clients from different companies are using your same code base. And you can structure it in multiple ways. One of them is to have one schema with all the tenants in it. And usually what you do is you'll filter it by tenant ID. So for instance, imagine you had a generic online, what is it, Shopify, for instance? You've all heard of Shopify? Where you can set up an online store really quickly. So you would be a tenant, and they'd all have the same database, and they'd separate you by tenant ID. So that's one way of doing it. And the current problem is, suppose you were Shopify and you wanted to create your own online store. How do you have one code base, so one Apex application, one schema that it's all going against, but every table has something called a tenant ID on it. So when you log in, you only see things with your tenant ID. So how do you make it unique for everyone? So I'll pick on Bill now. My branding is blue, and Bill works for Oracle. He's going to have red branding. Right now, there's no real good way pre-5.1 to do this. And in 5.1, it actually allows you to set the theme style, the universal theme style, based on your session. So before, you could only set it for the entire application, but now we're going to do it session-based. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So it's quite obvious this is like the standard blue theme in Apex. Nothing new here. Everyone's seen this, I assume? Yes? OK. If you go into Theme Roller, you'll notice by default there's a couple. So let's just say Vita Red is, assume Oracle Red. I don't know if it's exactly. But you can't really, I'm just going to close this. You can't really save it before 5.1. It was saved entirely with the application. You couldn't. It was an all or nothing. So if Bill wanted red, everyone would have red. If I wanted blue, everyone would have blue. But now there's this new API that says, that allows you to set the session based, set the style based on your session. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the login page, and you can probably put it on new session. That'd be a better place. And I'm just going to say if the URL looks like oracletest.com, and it could be anything you decide. This is just an example I decide. I'm going to turn it to red. So I'll just copy this code here. I'll go into, it's new login. Login pages are 9999. And I've got this process. Let's just create a new process. And I'm just going to paste that code there. Everyone saw that code? So let me just log out here. create a new session, and nothing really happened, right? So I'm going to log back in, and it still looks blue. But wait a second. You're going to have to trust me on this when I say that this is the exact same application. I have a DNS entry or host entry that maps oracletest.com to localhost. So you can see it's still app 108. And I'm going to run it, and when I log in, it's red, right? Because that was my if statement. So you could have that based on like a domain name or a username or some sort of preference that it would switch. And just to really prove this, I'll log in, the same credentials, exact same application, and even as I refresh both of them, they don't interfere with each other. And internally, even if you don't have multiple tenants, let's say you have multiple departments and they want to self-identify, one department's blue, one department's red, another department's green, you can do this at the same concept. That's a really good idea. So Bill's idea was even in dev and test and INT, you could have different themes so people are very aware. I never thought about that, but that would actually solve a lot of problems for us. So you're very clear what schema you're in. And it's at a very low hit, right? Just put it on your login page or initialization page process or application process. So that's one type of multi-tenant system that you see. One application, one schema. Let's go to another type. Suppose you have one schema per client. So your clients are very security concerned and they say, you know what, I don't want my data beside Bob's data, beside Sally data. So what you're going to do is create a schema for every single client, Bob, Sally, and John. But each schema is going to be the exact same tables, same packages, same codes. And you want to you have a couple of options. You can also have 3 applications, but from a deployment, that actually might get very heavy. So you're going to have one application for them. And how do you do it? Because you have one parsing schema in the Apex app. Does everyone understand the problem? Because you can only define an application to one thing. Now with 18.1, there's this new thing called set parsing schema for request. So one application can point to multiple schemas. And there's a couple key things is the workspace must have access to those multiple schemas. You still have your default schema, which is, let's say, to Bob, but then you may, from an administration perspective, you give the same workspace access to Sally and John as well. And it must be set up in the initialization code. So I'm going to go through right now and show you what this looks like. Let's go down here. So just to show you, I've got these 2 users, Giphy and Martin, on my system. And what I'm going to do is I've got to go in Martin's, and just to make it really clear, is in Martin's schema, I'm going to lowercase all the employee names, and I'm going to prefix all the employee names with M, just so you'll see a little bit of difference. So M stands for Martin, and you'll see the 2 differences between employees. And so now I'm just going to copy and paste this code, and it's very similar code to we had before. Oracletest.com is going to go to Martin, and then else I'm going to parse it as Giphy, which is actually our default schema, so you don't necessarily need to do it, but you get the case. I'm driving this off the URL because that's the easiest thing for me. And you can do it for different people. So let's go into here. We'll go into shared components. And if we go into, where is security? Up here. There's this initialization PL SQL code. So this used to be called VPD back in the days. I'm going to paste that. And so this is the Giphy schema here. This is the Martin schema. Right? The colors change, but look at the employee data right now. It still says they both have 2 separate tables, 2 separate things. So I'm going to refresh this, nothing changed. Employees still look the same. When I refresh this page, you'll notice that the employees are entirely different. Right? Very simple test case, but hopefully now that opens the door. This used to be one of the companies I worked for like 10 years ago. We had this set up and we had no workarounds. So we had to deploy the app like 10 times, and it's a real pain in the butt. Now you can have one app for 10 different schemas. Any questions on that? Nope? Okay. What? Can you send the, okay, getting close, Bill. Yeah.
Does that count for the substitution string as well? Like the schema substitution string that might be hooked up?
That's a great, so there's this, I forget what it is, it's like pound schema, or I don't know, I haven't tested that. You'll have to try that out. I'm going to assume yes, but definitely test it out. So Apex, this is just a small thing. I'm blowing by this because this was more of a pet peeve. How many people here have had to create and write collections before? Yes. How many people had to write this if block? Right? And if you know what I'm talking about, it's this. Right? You have to say before every time you write a collection, you have to say if a collection exists, delete it, and then create it. It was a real pain. Now, one statement, and just pass in this line, p truncate if exists. Yes, problem solved. Okay? I'm not going to demo this because you'll actually see it. And the reason why I didn't send the emails is you saw the problem, and some of you, going back to the email issue I had, was I said you need to create a session, right? You don't have a session in PL SQL. Now, natively supported, you can simulate and attach or create an Apex session in PL SQL. And I'm going to show you why this is really useful for you. So the problem is, suppose you have collections. Again, for those that have made collections, the only real way up until today has been to view and debug them is to go through the debugger in Apex and look at collections. Just to point that out, you'd go in your application, where is it? You'd go, session. I actually had a trick on how to do this, so I didn't have to do it, but you'd have to click on collections, click set, and you'd have to go through here and scan through all the data, and it wasn't really helpful. Or you just did what sometimes I used to do, is just write select star as a region, go through. It's not efficient. Right? But then when you ran select star in SQL Developer, you got nothing, right? Because it's tied to an Apex session. So this is what Apex Sessions solves, is it allows you to either create an entirely new session, which will solve the email problem, or it allows you to attach to an existing session. And I'm going to show both of these. Now, as a hint, if you're not on 18.1, you can do part of this with that open source utility package called OS Utils. They have something called join session. Read the documentation on it. It has its caveats, but it allows you to do what most of you can do here. So again, just because you're seeing it on 18.1, you can actually do it on 5X series right now. So just to prove this out, I'm going to go in here, and I'm just going to query the collections in SQL Developer, and I've got nothing. And now I'm going to go and create, you'll notice this is a SQL statement. I don't have to write an if-then block. I'm just going to create a collection, and I'm going to do this on, what page was I supposed to do it on? Apex collections. Oh, I've got to edit this. So I've got this code here that now when I click generate collection data, it just generates all my user objects, right? There's nothing too important with it. And again, I'm going to go in just to highlight when I do select star from Apex collections, I get nothing. Again, right? This is the problem, right? There's no real good way for developers to do it, and especially if you get creative and write views on top of collections, real pain in the butt to debug. So now what I'm going to do is, someone remember the app 108? I'm going to copy the session ID, and I'm going to go into app 108 and run it. So I'm calling this thing called apex session.attach. So I'm adjoining that session, not ending it or anything or creating a new one. And now when I query Apex collections, knock on wood, I get everything. Right? Pretty cool. So now you can join, filter, and you can test your views and do whatever you want, right? But it gets, hold on, I'm going to stop there on the coolness factor because I do not want to forget this demo that I promised you here. Where is it? The exec thing. So you'll notice before I got that error, now when I ran the exact same code, I was able to actually connect to the user's web source, just to take a sidestep, just to prove that it works, right? And it's that simple. All I should have done was write apex session.attach or create. Clear? All right, where were we here? Parsing schema. Okay, so next thing is, I'm going to go onto my page here. So now I've got the same session on my web browser as I do in PL SQL. And I've got my page items, first name and last name. So let's just put Martin D'Souza. I'll just click Save to save it. And just to point this out, it is in session state. So I see Martin here and D'Souza there. Right? Kind of nice. Now when I query this here, first name, last name as the V function, I'll also, okay, there was a reason why I've got to disconnect. Let me just disconnect and reconnect. Let me attach again. So here you see I've got Martin D'Souza now as my page items, right? Page 2, first name, and page 2, last name are exactly the same. Now, here is the one caveat. You've got to be very yes, question. Okay, the question is, why did I disconnect? And I'm going to explain that right now. In the next part of it, it's a great question. I'm going to put, let's say, John Smith here. I'm going to change the names in the Apex section. And when I look at session state, John and Smith are there. Now, when I run this again, it's going to still say Martin D'Souza. And the reason why, and I explored this because in OS Utils we had this exact same problems with a join session, is when you call the V function from PL SQL, behind the scenes, what happens is it actually stores it in an array in PL SQL. And because you haven't changed the state of the PL SQL object, the array pre-caches it. So though they say don't use the V function because it's slow, every time you use the V function, the first thing it does is it does two things. Does it exist in my array? If it does, it uses the value in the array. If not, it actually goes and queries the table. It does not query the table all the time. Once it's in their PL SQL object, it's done for that session. And so that's why it happened, and it's a good thing to know. So if you're developing, I'd probably recommend this more for development using the V function rather than actual production type of logic because of that. But the other way around is not necessarily true. So I'm going to do set session state of the first name from SQL Dev. Right? My first name is from SQL Dev. I don't know, just to show you this is live, I'm going to type in Bill. I'm going to run it, commit, and if I look at session state right now, you'll see that's there. So it's almost like just remember that it caches. When you do the V function, it caches, and that's why I actually have to disconnect. So I either have to disconnect and reset the package states or deattach and reattach. Did that answer your question? Okay. It's not to use it, just remember of the consequences of using it. So I would only recommend it right now until they change that functionality, because it's almost like they should have a dirty bit on there to use it for development purposes, but I wouldn't write full logic under that right now, given how it's done. And you can also detach a session here. So I'm no longer, and then just to show you, if I query collections, I've got nothing. Now, one other thing is, I've showed you to attach to an existing session. Let's say you've got a job, the nightly job, that you need to simulate certain things and send emails and do things like that. You can actually just create a new session straight from scratch. Notice how I don't pass in any session, I just pass in my username. And now when I go to send this email, I won't get that problem anymore that you used to get saying no session exists. And just to show you, here's my mail queue, and you'll see that if I don't know how the ordering goes by, but this is the one I just sent here, this one there. Now the other thing too is, I said everyone that's done apex mail.send without an apex session before used to get some error message. If you actually run it without an apex session in 18.1, it doesn't give you the error message anymore, it queues it up. And the only thing that's different is the app ID here is null. So in theory, you can send mail without a session, but I think most people are just used to it from the previous requirements. Any questions on that? No? Okay, the next thing is, this one is something new to me, so I don't really have super great examples on it. But suppose you wanted to have application level settings. This is a new feature in Apex 18. you can actually store them. There's a section in shared components, and there's an API to set and get. So I'll show you where it is right now. If you go into shared components, there's this new thing here called application settings. And let's just go and create a setting. I'm going to create something called dev only yes no, and the value is yes, and it's either yes or no, so you have to provide the list of values that are possible. And again, I haven't thought about all the great features to use about it, so I just wanted to show you, so maybe you can think of good ways to use it. And here I'm going to create a new session. And just to show you the APIs, you can get the value using apex_app_session.getValue. And this should say dev only yes, and then you can use apex_session.setValue to no, right? And then I'll commit, and if I run the exact same query again, there's two of them here because I actually have two apps, and it will set it to no. So it's a way to store like a name value pair at a session, at an Apex application level, like a configuration table. And you can probably script this as part of your releases. I don't, again, have great examples of what you'd put in there yet, maybe next year, but hopefully you guys can think of something interesting. So email templates. How many people here have ever had to write these email templates before? Yes? Okay. So we're going to, Apex now has a built-in email template functionality. And I'm going to show you how to use it and then call it straight from PL SQL. Now, one other thing you'd want is, just as a recommendation, use MailChimp if you're actually going to send out a lot of these. But if you just need to send out a few, or MailChimp or similar, you can do it in the APIs. So I'm going to go into shared components. This is new as well, email templates. I'm going to create an email template. I've got my code here. So Kscope 18, Kscope 18. There's also some great sample data just on your right-hand side. Email subject is just this Kscope 18 update. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to do this over here because I don't have an email provider set up. Let's just paste that here. And I'm just going to put in some header and footer information, just some simple HTML. But again, I would not use this probably for a lot of emails. If you had to send out mass emails, I wouldn't do it. But just showing you what this all looks like. So you'll notice that it has these replacement strings of pound, variable name pound. And as I've created it, it's actually created an email sample usage API below. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Right here, I can just copy and paste this apexmail.send, and it already does all the placeholder logic for me. So I've already done that in my in an application here. So let's just edit this page. I'm done with that. So I'm running this app differently. It's on apex.oracle.com because they have their email server set up and I don't. And I've got a button here that says, or a process that says send mail. And I'm just going to copy and paste that exact same code here. And I've just pre-written it so we don't have to type it all out. Let me just make sure it's valid. I should replace null. Okay, so here you can just see it looks very similar to the email, except you're providing the static ID and the placeholders, which is just a JSON object. And let's hope this all works. So I'm going to type in my email address. Oh, and Martin live demo. I'm going to hit send. So knock on wood, we've got in this mail queue. Okay, so we're just in the mail queue here, and I'm just going to have to refresh. It takes about 30 seconds sometimes. And it's going to show up in my junk mail when it does get sent. So this, in case you didn't know, when you send something with Apex Mail, it sends it, it puts it in a queue first, and then it logs it second. So there's two different tables, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Just remember this is the mail queue, and it's pretty large. You may have to come back to this if it pauses. What? No, I can't purge. It's on the Apex Works. Yeah, it's not mine. It's not mine to purge. So let's come back to that. You're going to have to trust me that it gets sent with that template. But just to see what it looks like, here we go. It just came up here. You can see that it just got sent Martin live demo. And I mean, it did flag it as spam, and that's why I wouldn't recommend doing it. I'd recommend using MailChimp, but you can use that API in those short instances that you need to do quick and dirty emails. All right, on to some JavaScript stuff. How many people here were in Anthony Rayner's JavaScript API demo a couple hours ago? Okay, so some of this might be new. The first thing is this is what I just added in, was keyboard shortcuts. So suppose you want to use your own keyboard shortcuts. You can actually write them right now in 18.1. And full disclosure, I just learned this 2 hours ago, so I put this part of the demo together. I don't know if this is best practice yet. It was kind of me scanning through the documentation while he was talking. But you can use the Apex Actions JavaScript API, and I'll show you what that demo looks like here. So if we go to page 2, and I'm going to open up the JavaScript console. And so suppose I want to do a shortcut for the save button, right? That's the goal we're trying to do. I can use this apexactions.add API. And I just have to name it, and here I'm going to simulate that the button is clicked when I do the shortcut, and I'm going to set it to Control W. Again, I can't recommend if this is best practice or not. I only had an hour to do it while someone was talking, but it does work. So I'm going to add that to, I'm just going to run it here in the console, and now just notice that I'll just change this to hello, and if I hit Control W, it actually saved the page. So it's not that hard anymore. You don't need all these third-party libraries to do shortcuts, and you can define all your own shortcuts. I wanted to add it in because I thought it was pretty cool on how easy it is to do without writing your own shortcut engine. Yes? Yeah, so he was talking about this has dependency on, I think, American keyboards, and that's why I said this is, I know as much as you do right now, Roland, and I can't answer more on that. So hopefully I'll try and learn more, and if you have anything, please blog about it and share it with the community. How are we doing on time? I'll go back to that after. Messages. So you know in Apex how you have, like, when an error message, when you click save and an error message occurs or a success message occurs, everyone knows what I'm talking about, that yellow and the green box. Now what happens if you want to do that yourself? You want to write your own custom ones. And the reason why you want to write your own custom ones is, imagine you had a dynamic action that saved something for you, and the users want the same user experience that said, hey, it was added, but you didn't really save the page, you just had a dynamic action that saved a part of the page. You could write, way back when you had to write all your own code, but in 5.1 it was never documented, and it was really unfortunate because it's always been there, they just didn't document it. You can actually write your own error and success messages, and it's really easy, and I've actually done this in some apps, and it's using the Apex Message API. Now this is, again, it's available now for you in 5.1, but it's documented in 18. So we'll go, I'll show you the demo here. I'm going to skip the spinner. So first thing you want to do is clear your errors in JavaScript. And then the first one, I'm going to show two different errors. So it's an array of error messages. And again, I won't get too caught up on syntax. But here I'm doing it in line with the last name. And here I'm doing an entire, like, something really crashed. So you can have as many errors as you want or just one error. And you'll see the difference in a second. So if I run that, this looks exactly, I didn't save the page, right? This never went to the database. This is pure JavaScript. So there's two types. The one you're used to with last name and the valid, and if I click on it, it goes right there. It behaves exactly the same as you're used to. And the other is this is just a general system page level error. And it's very easy to do in JavaScript. And to show you how to do a successful one, so pretend you make an AJAX call and it worked properly, I just write the exact same thing, and there is a success message. And it's really simple, really easy to use, so I highly recommend that. Now, the last thing on the JavaScript side is JavaScript validations. So the way I like to think of this is, in Apex, we have Apex validations. So you submit the page, it makes a hit to the database in 5.1 now. You don't actually refresh the page, you just make an AJAX call back and forth, and it says whether it's an error. But suppose, for whatever reason, you have a requirement that you want to validate a page item before it even gets sent. So you want to do some native JavaScript validation. We're not talking Apex validations, we're talking native JavaScript validations, and get some sort of feedback. You can actually do that, and this isn't really well documented, you're going to have to trust me on this code sample, but this is essentially saying anytime before we hit submit, and it doesn't matter where the submit occurs, I'm going to go and set what's called a custom validity, and I'm just saying everything has to be in lowercase for the first name. Right? So you can set your own JavaScript type of homemade validations. So I'm going to run this here, and I'm just going to write my name as I normally would. Right? I write uppercase Martin. And if I paste this code, you don't really need to see it right now, and I click submit, just like I normally do, so I don't have to change any behavior on the page, you'll see this is the only thing I don't like, is you can't control this, or at least I don't know how to, but at least it flags it as an error here. So you can do some mini pre-validations before you even hit the database. And again, the code is called custom validity. Not really well documented, but you'll have this snippet code in the sample code file. Any questions on that? No? Okay. So I'm not going to do this. If you want to know, just because of time, and I think late in the day, I'm not going to, this one gets pretty complicated, but all you need to know is that if you have a requirement for a third party to monitor the stats of your Apex instance, so you want to see what's running low, hot, like what's taking long, what's taking short. We're not talking in SQL. They need a JSON data structure. So there's all these third-party monitoring tools out there that you can use, and you want to send them that, or they want to subscribe. Using the instance admin, you can actually expose RESTful services in your workspace environment from at the entire instance level, and that has a RESTful API for it. And let me see if I have any of this sample up. So this is some of the data JSON that comes back. So you can actually see that it will produce its own logs. It shows you workspace. This is a program I use called Paw, or if you use Postman, it's the same thing. But it tells you the workspace name, the application name, I don't know, some other information that a logging platform might want. And it's available. It's in the REST Instance Administrative Services, so it's something that your administrator has to do. So if you don't have admin access, you probably won't get it. I don't think most people need it, but it is good to know that it exists, and I probably should blog about it one day because it is a cool feature if you want it. So just to recap, the goal today was hopefully review some of these APIs and get you interested in it, and I hope that this encourages you that when you go home and things settle down, you take the time to actually scan through the API and just see what's relevant, what you could use. You don't have to know everything, you just need to know it exists. You just need to be good enough. And once you know it exists, when you find a problem, you're like, oh, I know there's an API for that. These are the two links directly in the slides on how to get to the JavaScript and the PL SQL for 18.1. I do have a small favor to ask. Please fill out the surveys or do them online. What I'm really interested in is just comments on how we can improve this presentation. So please make sure you put some meaningful comments in that, or do it on the phone if you're doing the iPhone app. And with that, any questions? Yes. Was there someone in there that put up their hand, or did I miss? No? Okay, Bill?
Yeah, that third-party thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you use that one service, but whatever service you use, you put in the admin? Is what you're saying?
No, the third-party service will subscribe to your Apex instance, and you have to give it some authentication token, like an authentication token, so it constantly pulls JSON data structure. So what I was trying to show you here, and just in the name of time, pretend this is some fancy monitoring system. it was actually connecting to my database or my whole Apex environment and saying, go give me all the stats and logs you have. And this JSON here, I can show you the raw file. This is what it looks like. And it was just showing it in pretty print here. Now, it will do, third-party logging tools will actually do something with this. I'm not an expert in that, but just be aware. Any other questions? No? All right, with that, enjoy the night. Have a fun time. I'll stay up there if you have any questions, and come grab your t-shirt.